Welcome to StaarCast, a show about tarot, divination, and all things mystical. StaarCast is a celebration of StaarCon, the Southeastern Tarot Artist and Readers Conference. I'm Amy Mauser, and here's your host, Christiana Gaudet.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of StaarCast. I am very excited to introduce to you my friend, Beverly Frable. Beverly, how are you?
I'm wonderful, and thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to have you. So, Beverly, you were a presenter at StaarCon 2021. You are also a member of our constellation, which means you are part of our decision-making and workhorse body. And we'll have some tasks for you for 2022.
Great.
In 2021, of course, you did this great workshop on comparing and understanding the three styles of tarot.
Right.
The Waite, the Marseille, and what I always call the Crowley, because I have no idea how to pronounce that word. Is it Toth? Is it Toth? Is it Thoth? Is it Tahote? How do you say it?
I say toss, but you will find varieties of that. That's fine.
And do you work with all three of those decks?
I have. Right now, I'm mostly dedicated to Tarot Marseille, but I mean, the Toth intrigues me. Rider Waite, nothing. No offense to anyone, but I'm kind of bored with that. I mean, I've really been using that a lot, but now I'm ready to. I'm exploring other areas.
Yes, and in fact. We will give people just a little teaser here. I've already roped you in to presenting at StaarCon 2022, which of course will be a hybrid presentation in person in Palm Beach Gardens and also online on Sullivan's. And you're going to be presenting something else I don't know how to pronounce.
It's called, it's ogham. And people probably have seen it everywhere. And it's simply pronounced kind of like om, like a meditative chant. And it's Celtic and it dates back to, don't quote me on this, I think it's the 1300s, but it goes way back there. It's fascinating history. And it also honors trees, which are near and dear to my heart. As you can kind of see from the necklace I'm wearing, if you can see that, it's a labradorite.
Beautiful labradorite.
Isn't it beautiful?
Labradorite with a tree on it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. I've forgotten. Some of us won't see it in person. But it honors trees, and every stave, as they're called, is made from a different tree.
Wow.
And they're all meaningful, and they all have symbols on them, very similar to this. Each symbol is a meaning. Each tree adds significance to it. So what we'll be doing is we'll be talking about the tree it's made from, why it's chosen for this symbol, what the symbol means, and how to use these for divination.
And now if people want to be prepared for this workshop, can they buy a set? Do you have to make your own set? How does that work?
Well, a lot of people are really feel closer to a set they personally make. I have not yet done that, but I intend to. But you can also buy sets on Etsy. You can buy them other places as well. But I'm telling you, the ones on Etsy are somewhat reasonably priced. They're small. You can spend up to like $200 or more because some of these woods that are made from this, the trees themselves, don't exist here in the United States. They only exist in, like Wales or over in the UK or someplace like that. So, I mean, if you get a genuine set of the real tree, the stock, if you will, then you need to have it purchased by somebody over there, or from somebody over there. And I will be giving good links to do that. There's great sites to go ahead and do that. So you'll be getting all that information in the class as well.
Wonderful. Yeah. So that helps get us excited for StaarCon 2022, which of course will be January 21st through 23rd. But you're here today to teach us something.
Yeah.
What are you going to teach us?
Well, actually, what I'm really kind of turned on to, if you will, is going beyond the keywords and doing your divination beyond what you typically associate with the cards that you see and interpret in the way that you normally do. It's kind of another layer to add on to the interpretation you give when you do a divination. And what I've done is over the years, I've collected a lot of information when I've had different classes. Camelia Elias is notorious for this, is reading beyond the textbooks, if you will. And she's a great teacher and one of my main inspirations as to how to look beyond what is in your mind and actually read what you see. So she teaches stuff. It can be as simple as looking at the number sequence and seeing if there are a lot of low numbers and then suddenly it goes to 8 or 9, and what that leap might mean in your reading, or vice versa. Or if there are like sequence numbers, but one is missing, what might that mean in your mind? Same for suits. If you see a lot of swords, for instance, a lot of wands, you don't see any cups at all, and yet you have a lot of cards, or there's only 1 or 2, to interpret and give thought to that when you're reading. She's really big on the expressions and what the characters are looking toward. And I actually have an example here. I can tell you and I know people won't be seeing this, but if you look at the Tarot Marseille and you look at the star and you look at the temperance card, I'll be showing it for those that are seeing it.
Okay.
You can see in the Tarot Marseille, the temperance card fills the frame, if you will. It's one of the biggest characters in that deck. And look at the similarity if you have the cards and you're able to pull them up if you're not looking at this online. And to see they're both bending slightly in one direction. Notice things like that and what that might mean when you're interpreting. It may mean nothing, but it may catch your eye if you think to look for things like that. They're both working with water, obviously. In the temperance card in this particular deck, you don't even see her feet, which is unusual. A lot of times you do see their feet and one in the water, etc. So notice differences like that and interpret them into the reading that you have. Another thing I think is really fascinating, if you give thought to it, are the colors that you're seeing. I never really, with Thoth, it's pretty evident. If those of you who use a Thoth deck, you can tell the colors are very symbolic of the suits. I mean, you almost feel the passion of the color and feel the passion of the suit because of the way that they've done their cards. But in Rider-Waite, for instance, if you look at the 5 of Swords, the Page of Pentacles, the 7 of Wands, and the 4 of Cups, if you pull those out, I'm going to show them for those that are seeing it visually. That's what the 4 cards look like here. And it's one of the few, some of the few, let me say, cards that show the character in green. Now, these colors on this particular deck are not that vivid, but most of the Rider-Waite decks, you can see the characters are wearing green. Now, what's interesting to me is that's not typical in a lot of the characters shown in the Rider-Waite deck. And there's 7 colors in tarot that were used to make a tarot deck. They're white, black, yellow, red, blue, green, and flesh. Those are the 7 colors that most decks have in common.
And when you say flesh, you mean Caucasian flesh?
Well, yes, thank you for pointing that out.
How about beige?
They call it flesh, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's Caucasian flesh. And, and some of the different decks obviously have different colors. But those are the 7 colors that are typically called tarot colors, right? And the green in the tarot color is, they say the green signifies struggle, growth, change, nature. What's fascinating, if you think about that definition of what green represents, and you look at these cards that I've named, I mean, each of them are showing struggle, growth, change, and nature. So what's fascinating to me is before you even really give thought to recognizing the colors in the card, your mind intuitively is doing interpretations before you really even realize it. Similar to how we breathe. It's breathing without us thinking about it, right? So there are things going on behind your mind that are already interpreting part of these cards that you may not be aware of, and things you may want to take time to note that you may typically not notice. And those are all things that I really encourage people to do because it really does alter the reading sometime. One other example I'll give is in Thoth, because I like to at least represent every card.
I'm so appreciating that you're doing that. Yes.
Yeah. And if in Thoth, if you look at the 4 of Discs and the 6 of Swords, now those 2 cards are very similar in shape. If you happen to notice that. I mean, the four of this clearly has a square, and it's very organized looking, and it looks like this in the orange. I'm showing it online for those of you who are seeing us online.
Right. So the four of discs has a square and then four squares within it.
Exactly.
Now,
it's like very orderly. And this one is the Six of Swords. And you can see the square is kind of tilted. There is a square there, but it's very tilted.
It's really a diamond.
It's actually tilted in a way that appears to be a diamond.
Right.
And it's really askew, if you want to use that word. You know, there's just some organization that doesn't appear there. I mean, things are a little bit out of
one is more organized and set, and the other is less organized and maybe more in motion.
Exactly. So if you're doing a reading and these two show up, now that may mean that you want to give thought to how they relate to each other and what that may add to your divination and how that may influence this organization you're seeing and then this, or vice versa. Those patterns, and this methodology, some people refer to as pattern reading. And a lot of people consider it to be an advanced way of reading because it kind of surpasses all the things that you learn from all the books that you might read about the meanings of these cards. And that's the sort of stuff that fascinates me, because if you go back to the history of tarot, a lot of the meanings, quote unquote, that we associate with tarot today are people's opinions that have evolved into quote unquote facts of meaning,
Sure.
And I like to question stuff like that. So that led to a study on this whole topic. And that's pretty much what I was going to encourage people to start to do.
So I love that. And I certainly, as far as like the trends of distribution in terms of numbers and suits, I think that's something that I would say most readers who do a good job reading think about, that's something that you think about. And, I like that you say intuitively, because you may or may not like really sit there. I mean, sometimes I'll sit there and count them. Okay, how many cups, how many swords, which is more. Sometimes I'll do that. And sometimes it's just like, oh man, there's a lot of swords there. Right.
right. Yeah.
But that there is an intuitive thing. Now, I love looking at the patterns, and I think no matter what deck you're working with, there are cards that will strike you visually, whether it's by the color or the pattern, of being very similar, one being a progression from the other, or being very different.
Yeah.
And whether we do that consciously or intuitively, subconsciously, I think it almost has to be a part of how you read. Like, here's the thing. Here's what really ticks me off.
Okay.
It's when people think that a tarot reading, or really any kind of random token divination reading, is simply giving a series of keywords or textbook interpretations. That is not a freaking reading. I'm sorry, it's not.
I agree. Yep, absolutely.
There has to be an extrapolation.
Right.
And that can be an extrapolation based on the context of the question.
Yeah.
Based on, as you say, like what you're really talking about is how the cards relate to each other.
Right.
How the cards speak to each other. That's also how we extrapolate. That's how you do a reading. And I think it's funny that this is being taught as an advanced level skill, because in my mind, if you're not doing that, you're not doing a reading.
I think, a lot of times it's identified that way because it's new to some people that have been reading or are learning reading. And it's not a methodology that's used in a lot of intro books, if you will. I mean,
yeah, man, we screwed up with that. That's not right.
Yeah,
it should be. That's the point. It should be.
Yeah.
Now, what is a new concept to me, though, that I wanted to ask you about is when we look at, like, when you said, like, how the people are leaning. Certainly, I have noticed, especially in relationship readings, I have noticed, like, are the people looking at each other, looking in the same direction, looking away from each other. You know, that can tell you a lot in a relationship reading about how people are communicating and getting along. But you mentioned two characters and two different cards where they're both leaning in a particular direction. What would that say to you in a reading?
Well, you know, again, like you mentioned or referred to, it depends on the reading, the question, the flavor of the other cards. Now, in this case, I use Temperance and the Star as an example, and Tarot Marseille, how they're both kind of leaning to what would be their right, actually.
Fair enough. Okay, their right are their right, stage left.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You know, and I tend to look at the right as being, when I'm reading, I tend to look at the right as being the future, the left as being the past, but I also could look at the left as being incoming energy and the right being expelling energy. You know, I mean, it depends, you know, and it could mean it's looking at or leaning toward the cards on the left or the cards on the right. You know, it's never the same for me. And that's what's fascinating about tarot, you know, because somebody told me the other day that the first time ever they got the Chariot card and they saw a wheelchair, and they never saw a wheelchair in the Chariot card before. And it ended up being pertinent to the particular reading that they were giving. And that's a great example because that happens, you know, yeah. You don't know where, you don't know why, but it's exactly what hits you then. And where does that come from? That comes from wherever all these other things come from, you know.
Well, and I think that really is the psychic and intuitive aspect of divining with pictures.
Yeah.
You know, whether we're talking tarot, oracle, you know, whatever, you know, cartomancy, whatever cards we're working with.
Yeah.
And I think the more that we think about these things, you know, and that's the whole thing, is how much of this is cognitive front brain and how much of it is intuitive. And maybe one becomes the other. Like if you're taught, like you're teaching us right now, to think about these things, and you can be guaranteed that for the readings I do for the rest of the day, I'm going to be looking for those patterns. I'm going to be looking at that maybe more than I normally consciously do.
Well, you know, the part of it that fascinates me is I don't know if we need to give thought to it or just let it flow more easily than it might, you know, stop blocking it. And that's the part that, you know, is unknown to me. But, you know, there's a lot of studies on brain activity that will tell you that all these things are going on before we even are aware, you know, and that's the stuff that fascinates me, and how we get that to flow better is really part of what I think this is about too. Now, I've met people that divine with skeleton keys, and that's some of what I've been studying. That and ribbons, how to divine with ribbons, skeleton, and tea leaves, of course, is another thing where you get some kind of visual, you know, and you work with that. Right. All those things are things I'm studying right now because I want to see how all the divination tools tied together, not just cards. Because I think there's so much more going on with other tools that we weren't giving thought to, that we never thought to use in our divination, and we can mix and match, and we can make it all work that way. And that's what I want to do.
Wow, that is so great, and so I think that's so such a good way of helping us understand who you are, Beverly, and sort of how you come at all of this.
Yeah.
You and I have known each other for a while. And of course, we know each other through the tarot world, you know, and that's what unites most of us.
Yeah.
But that idea, that love of divination, and the recognition that people have been divining, you know, really probably since the very beginning of time, people have been divining long before there were printing presses, long before there were cards. People were reading the wind in the grass.
Yes, exactly. And that's part of what this ogham divination that I'll be talking about in StaarCon is about. This was back like in I want to say the 12 and 1300s, you know, where, you know, sticks were used, you know, symbols on sticks were used to divine. And you can go to Ireland even today, and you can see rocks with the same symbols that are on these sticks. And there's a whole language, a whole message that they're delivering, and they exist over there. And there are people that take tours just to see those rocks. And they're very meaningful, and it's a whole culture outside of what we're used to here in the United States, and it's existed way before we did. I mean, way before the United States did. It's,
right.
It's a fascinating thing. Yeah, it goes way back. You're right.
That is so wonderful. So we are really appreciative of what you've just shared with us. And I think I love what you say about just allowing it, and we talk a lot about allowing the cards to speak.
Yeah.
But we don't talk so much about what that actually means. And I think that you very succinctly have given us some real operational ways of doing that. So we really appreciate that. And we are really looking forward to your presentation at StaarCon 2022.
Well, thank you.
Tickets are, at this recording, tickets are not yet available, but they will be really soon. So everyone should make sure they keep their eye on the website. That's StaarCon.com. And that's StaarCon with 2 A's, StaarCom. Beverly, we are just so excited to have you as part of our StaarCon community.
The honor is all mine. Thank you, Christiana, for putting it together. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you for being part of it. When I first got the group together, what I did was I created on Facebook Messenger a group, put you in it along with a few people, and I called it like our conference in Florida.
That's right.
And you were the first person that came back who was like, oh, we're doing this?
Yeah, I was excited.
Right. But, without your enthusiasm and what you're really willing to bring to this, it wouldn't happen. No one person can build a community. No one person can make this kind of thing happen. So I'm just super grateful to you and super grateful for what you bring to the StaarCon community and also what you brought to us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for StaarCast. For more information about our annual conference, visit us online at StaarCon.com. That's StaarCon.com. We are looking forward to seeing you in January.